For me, what I hope to get is really an understanding of why to use the second person. I was a bit hesitant reading this book because the topic is quite heavy. I'm talking to this boy, Sonny, and he's very separate from me. A funny theory that humans may descend from frogs instead of primates, but then the development to me was a bit a letdown. I thought that was quite funny. Hi friends, welcome back to the channel. As we left off in the last episode, episode 2, I was getting back into the groove of getting familiar with the pages that I left unattended for so long, and things were going well until I found a long lost chapter that I had written in second person, and this sent me spiraling a bit in just pondering whether I should continue writing this novel in third person or whether I should go back to my original idea, which clearly was using a combination of the first and second person. What I said in the last episode is that I wanted to start doing some research and reading books written in second person to understand the use of this narrative tool and the type of books, the length, the genre, kind of the tone used. So this is what we're gonna do in this third episode. First, maybe a few reflections on what the second person means to me. In a way, I think using the second person immediately changes the relationship between the writer and the reader, in the sense that it creates a sense of intimacy, it collapses distance between the two, and it can feel intimate or also conspirational in a way, depending on the type of book. The flip side though, I think the challenges is that if not used properly, it can feel fake, artificial, it can feel accusatory in tone, or maybe even a bit emotionally exhausting depending on the theme of the book. What I imagine when I think about books written in second person is that there can either be both the I and the you, in the sense that the narrator, the first person narration, is a character in the book and it addresses consistently a you, which could be either another character in the book or in a way a more generic reader. Otherwise, there could be only the you, and in that sense the narrator doesn't really appear in the page so much, but just addresses either the reader or a character through the you. And then there is a matter of scope, so it could be that the entire novel is written in second person, or that the second person is used consistently, maybe in a few repeating chapters, as more of a device. But the rest of the book could be written in, I don't know, first or third person. So this is a bit what I have in mind, what I expect to find when I will explore these novels. For me, what I hope to get from this exploration is really an understanding of why to use the second person, where it works well and where it feels a bit more artificial, and then assess whether it's good for the story that I want to tell. So without further ado, let's dive in the list of books in second person that I have selected for this vlog. The first book I selected, I actually finished it already. I listened to the audiobook on the way to work, and it's The Friend by Sigrid Nunez. So this book came out in 2018, and actually they made a movie adaptation in 2024 with Naomi Watts. It fell into the first kind of block of what I expected books using the second person to be. So it's a book about grief. The protagonist, who is a middle-aged woman and a writer and a teacher of creative writing, recently discovers that her friend and mentor has passed away by suicide. And in the book, she is the narrating person, so the I of the book, and she consistently addresses her friend who's passed away using the second person, therefore creating that one-sided conversation. The story starts when the protagonist is called for a coffee by the third and last wife of her mentor, and the wife tells her that she would like for the protagonist to take on the dog. The story kind of unfolds from there. There is a thin plot going throughout, which is a bit this question that repeats itself: does anything bad happen to the dog? Because the protagonist lives in a New York apartment where pets are not allowed, so at the start she doesn't know if she can keep this dog, and there is drama on whether she will lose their apartment. So drama in a very loose sense, in the sense this is a bit the question that keeps the story going. But yeah, so my final thoughts about this book is that I actually really enjoyed it. It's a short book, it's just about 200 pages, and it flows very well. I as the reader did not feel like I was being addressed with the second person. It was clear to me that it was this person who passed away who was being addressed, and it didn't make me feel too emotionally weighted down by this choice. And this is probably because of the tone of the book that was actually quite unemotional in a way for what it was, except for the parts talking about the dog. Whenever she talked about the dog, especially towards the end as the dog ages, those were very emotional. Yeah, I hope that made sense. And now on to the second book of the list. I'm here in a beach resort in Indonesia, but unfortunately the weather isn't too perfect because it's borderline monsoon season, so right now it's really gray and kind of windy, but that means I have a lot of time for reading by the pool, and I've started the second book of the selection of books written in second person. This is called Montelier Parade by Carl Gary. It's an Irish author, and the book is set in Dublin. So the narrator addresses this young boy, Sonny, with the U, and the story follows Sonny while he's in high school and he feels very out of place, he feels very lonely, and he sees and meets this older woman and kind of starts an infatuation with her. So far it's not really clear why the book is written in second person, in the sense that the narrator doesn't seem to have any role within the story. So that's different from the first book, where kind of the narrator was inside the book. It was her story and she was talking to her dead friend directly, so the you was her friend who had died. In this book the narrator doesn't really appear, so I'm not really clear why it's written in second person, and I think it definitely creates a sense, an experience of a more intimate experience for the reader, in the sense that it seems like the author is speaking to us, but I think this was what some of the reviews and commentary were suggesting. For me, for so far, again, it's only the first 50 pages, this hasn't really happened, in the sense that I don't feel like the author is talking to me. I definitely, when I read it in my mind, I definitely think he's talking to this boy Sonny, and he's very separate from me as the reader. But maybe, I don't know, it's an issue of me not being a teenage boy, and so not really being able to kind of to really feel Sonny in my body and in my identity. But that being said, I'm enjoying the book, so I think I will finish it. Again, it's quite a short book, it's only 230 pages. I've seen a pattern with the books written in second person, they tend to be very short. But yeah, so I'll finish it, and in case there is anything more to report on why the author chose the second person or what I felt reading the second person, I will update you. I'm reading book 3 on my commute on the way to work and back home again. Book 3 is Half Asleep in Frog Pajamas, a quirky, satirical and comic novel written by Tom Robbins and published in 1994. In this novel, the book uses the second person in present tense to address directly the protagonist, Gwen Matty, a young stockbroker in Seattle whose life unravels completely when the stock market crashes. We follow her long weekend over Easter as she is pulled into a series of events and unexpected adventures. The novel features a cast of eccentric characters, such as a fortune teller, a monkey, a Japanese doctor who claims to have cured colon cancer, and Larry Diamond, a mysterious gambler. In particular, this last character puts forward a funny theory that humans may descend from frogs instead of primates. Frogs are sensitive to the world and they can feel subtle shifts in reality before we do. Therefore, since frogs are disappearing from the world, this is definitely a warning sign. It might mean that the world is out of balance and humans have lost touch with their instincts. Okay, so here to share my thoughts on book 3. So it was about, it took me quite a few days to finish listening to it because it's about 400 pages, and I didn't necessarily love it in the sense that I was really intrigued by the premise of kind of having this, following this long weekend in the life of a stockbroker whose life falls apart, and I was looking forward to the satirical language, but then the development to me was a bit a letdown. For example, one of my favorite characters who I thought could be really interesting was the fortune teller, but like she disappears 1/3 through the book, even earlier, and then she never reappears, so I was like, that's a shame. And at the end, a lot of focus is given to this Larry Diamond, which is also a bit of a creep of a story because he's definitely middle-aged, I don't know. And then he has this relation with the protagonist who is like, I think she might not even be 30. My camera died, so I'm gonna finish giving my thoughts on the phone. As I was saying, the last part of the book is all about Larry Diamond, and there is this very long dialogue, like it must be 50 pages on the actual paperback, that is just Gwen asking probing questions and just to give the chance to Larry Diamond to give long, convoluted answers about his frog theory. And so that's when the book lost me completely, because I hate when there are these like very fake dialogues that are only an excuse for a character to explain their world philosophy. But for 50 pages, come on. But doesn't really matter, because the point was to see how the author was using the second person. And again, it's a bit like in book 2, when basically it's just the author addressing the main character in second person. It's not a technique that I really love, because my mind just processes it as first person, I think my mind processes it as first person. I don't love the use of the second person in this way, because I don't feel that I actually identify with the character at all. Because they're very specific characters, right? In this case, it's a young woman stockbroker in Seattle whose life comes crashing down when the stock market does, and that's not really a reality that speaks close to me. But yeah, let's see what book 4 has for us. Counting Backwards, written by Binnie Kishenbo and published by Soho Press in 2025, begins with Leo, a middle-aged man, experiencing unsettling hallucinations, like seeing Gandhi cooking lentils in the courtyard. He is entering the early stages of Lewy body dementia. As his condition worsens, with a life expectancy of 3 to 8 years, he shifts between moments of lucidity and long periods of absence. His wife, Addie, must navigate not only the emotional weight of his loss, but also financial strain and the struggle to find proper care. The novel highlights the duty of care and the isolating reality that families often face alone. My thoughts about book 4. The novel uses the second person in present tense in the same way that the previous two did, so the author addresses Addie, the wife, directly. This makes the reading feel more immediate and more intimate in a way. This is honestly the best book of this second person series that I've read so far. Actually, I really enjoyed listening it on the way to work. I was a bit hesitant reading this book because the topic is quite heavy, and usually I don't like really reading about terminal illnesses or very dramatic experiences like this, but this But this topic is handled with a lot of care, a lot of lightness, even laughter. So in the end, it really didn't feel such a burdensome experience. The novel made me reflect a lot about the nature of care in the US. There is definitely a big financial strain attached to it, but more than that, also how lonely this experience is, how lost the family is, even to simply find the right care facility and to make the right choices. And there is also a lot of the stigma associated with dementia and other forms of mental disability, in as much as everyone kind of disappears when the illness progresses. Also, on the side note, the family cat is called Roberta. That's my name. So I thought that was quite funny. So yeah, this one book I would definitely recommend, actually, even in general, beyond the second person narration. But now let's see, we have one final book, so let's see what book 5 is all about. Bright Lights Big City by Jay McInerney, published in 1984, introduces us to the protagonist Jamie Conway. When we meet him, he is caught in a downward spiral of recreational drugs, sleepless nights and mounting trouble at work, where he is employed as a fact-checker at a Manhattan magazine. Much of this unraveling stems from grief. His wife, a model in New York, has left him with a phone call from Paris to say she is never coming back. The novel follows the slow disintegration of his life as he drifts through the dazzling, neon-lit nights of New York City. I must say, I really like this last book. It's quite short, so it was a very quick read. I enjoyed the setting in the 80s in New York City. I liked all the weird ways that they were calling recreational drugs, which mostly I think meant cocaine. And for example, here it says, "Your brain at this moment is composed of brigades of tiny Bolivian soldiers, and they need the Bolivian marching powder." The use of the second person is consistent with the last few books, so it's just the author addressing his protagonist with the second person. And yeah, I mean, I think in a way it's supposed to create intimacy, but for me, it just, I don't feel like I swap places with the protagonist at all. Unfortunately, I still very much read it as a different person from me, and in this case probably because my life in New York City was very different from this one. But still, I liked reading about New York City in the 80s and this the atmosphere and all these social gatherings were with aspiring writers and editors and models. The model in particular I thought was fascinating because by pure coincidence I had just watched also the documentary on Netflix on America's Next Top Model, which actually the show I never watched on TV, but obviously I heard about it. And so while listening to this book I was picturing the ex-wife as one of the contestants on that show. Bright Lights Big City is now very much considered a classic of contemporary American literature. I had never heard about the book or the author before looking up books written in second person for this little research, but I'm glad I did, and it's a book I would recommend. I think it was actually quite fun, and I mean the protagonist is completely self-destructing, but yeah, it reminded me a bit of books by the Beat generation and what have you, so yeah. But here my takeaway for the purpose of this video and this little research, which was to assess whether the second person narration would fit the story that I'm writing. From what I understand, the second person narration really falls into two big buckets. The first is when in books they usually have a first person narration and the protagonist consistently addresses throughout the book another person with the you. And these are people who usually can't participate in the dialogue because they are absent, and in many cases maybe they passed. And then the second bucket is just the authors that decide to address their protagonist in second person, and these seem to be the majority, or at least of my sample. As I said many times, it didn't really work for me because my brain processed it as a third person narration, and I didn't really feel like I was swapping places with the protagonist. But while doing this whole research, it reminded me that when I was in school and I was studying Calvino, he's a very famous writer in Italian literature, there was a book that I actually enjoyed, and the title in English is If on a Winter's Night a Traveler. And here the author, this is more of an experimental book where the author actually addresses the reader with the second person you, because the book is all an experiment of a book reading itself, so it's a much more whimsical use of the second form, but I guess this will fall into a minority third bucket. Anyways, so yes, I've decided that I will try to rewrite the chapters that I have in second person, because I think it could enhance my story. That being said, unfortunately, this means that my word count goes back to 0, because I have to start from the first line again. But yeah, so if you want to see how this turns out, check back in 2 weeks for the next episode.